Mo, thanks for joining me today on the Rebound Rundown. For those of you watching on YouTube, make sure you go down and check out that audio link in the description to be able to listen to the whole podcast here going forward. Make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. But Mo, I want to talk about the Cincinnati and Dayton game, which technically is a neutral site down there at Heritage Bank Arena tonight. That game tipping off at 8:30, and Cincinnati, they've only played one game in the last 2 weeks, high intensity game, crosstown shootout. Dayton, they've had their challenges of their own. They win a game against Marquette and then come back with a weird game against UNLV, stuck in the middle there earlier this week, which was the trappiest of all trap games up there at UD Arena. So, Mo, I know you have ties to both programs. I want to start with Cincinnati, though. And I want to get your take on where you think Cincinnati is going into this game, because they looked a little shaky at different points, but they've been able to pull out wins, and maybe none bigger than the one they got last Saturday over Xavier. Where do you kind of stand right now on Cincinnati going into this game?
Well, I think from a record perspective, if they win this game against Dayton, you're going to feel pretty good about what they've accomplished going into Big 12 play from the standpoint of, at least setting themselves up to use Big 12 play to propel themselves to the NCAA tournament. I still think there are a lot of unknowns about this team. They won the Skyline Chili Crosstown Shootout. They beat Xavier. They deserve all the credit they have gotten for that victory. But I thought offensively the way they played left a little bit to be desired, because the half-court offense became about throwing a lob pass or nothing else. And I'm not sure that's going to work if that's the model on a regular basis moving forward. And so one of the things that I want to see starting tonight, and as we move forward into Big 12 play, they do have a bye game against Grambling State on Sunday, is can they become more efficient and more effective in the half court? That to me has been the storyline of the last 2.5 weeks, where since they went to Georgia Tech and won and really executed well in the half court, I feel like that's kind of gone backwards. So does the Dayton game give them a chance to kind of fling that in the other direction? I always wonder too, I talk about this all the time. In August and September, you hear about how, a team is they could go 10 deep or they can go 11 deep. And it's like, yeah, okay. Well, when they're playing games in January that count, when they're playing hard games, are they really going to be playing 11 guys? I still kind of wonder what's UC's depth going to look like when they start playing really hard games, including this one against Dayton. Who sees their minutes get significantly reduced? Who are some guys that maybe don't play? And is there someone in the back end of the rotation who can make a case to play even more and become more of a factor over the final 2.5 months of the season? I have a lot of questions. And maybe some of those get answered starting with this game against a really good Dayton team.
Jizzle James was 0 for 11 from the field against Xavier, and Wes Miller talked earlier this week about sitting down with Jizzle one-on-one, watching the film, trying to go over some things and figure out where they need to correct some of those issues going forward. And I think obviously we've seen all of the potential in the world from Jizzle, and you have a super, I would say, physical but also talented point guard there that can develop into something special going forward. What do you want to see out of him, especially starting here tonight as you look forward toward conference play too?
More shot making. That's the obvious answer, right? He was 0 for 11 against Xavier. I love everything else about Jizzle James. I think he can control a game. He's a guy that I want to have the ball in his hands in the closing moments. I think he's committed to the defensive end and getting better. That was kind of the knock on him last year. One of the things we talked about a lot was, well, why doesn't Jizzle play more? Well, he's got to guard his guy on the other end. I certainly think you've seen some buy-in there. I want to see more consistent shot making. And if their bread and butter of the half-court offense is going to be the lob pass, then I want to see more accurate lob passes.
All right, I would agree with you on that one. All right, let's talk about Dayton, your alma mater. had a very fun season so far. 10-2 on the year. They have that 18-point win over UConn. Beat Marquette last weekend at UD Arena by 8 after trailing in the first half. Completely turned things around in the second half. Totally controlled the game. Environment looked awesome. Then you come back and you almost lay an egg against UNLV, but you get the win. You move on. That's what's important. And now you have what could be a statement game against Cincinnati. Well, it is a statement game, but could be a statement win against Cincinnati on Friday night. This game last year was really intriguing to me. Dayton got the win. It was a very heavy Dayton crowd. I'm not really sure what to expect here from this game tonight. 8:30 on a Friday night. There's college football, the college football playoff on as well, but I don't think that's going to affect either one of these teams. Where do you kind of line up with Dayton and how much they need this game?
Well, if you look at the two teams, Cincinnati is entering Big 12 play where there's no shortage of opportunities for really good wins. Dayton's entering Atlantic 10 play where there's a significant shortage of opportunities for really, really good wins. And there's a lot of opportunities for really bad losses. So I view this game from a Dayton perspective as this is a significant resume game. Not that it's not for Cincinnati, because I think it is. That's frankly how I look at this from a Bearcat perspective is, all right, you beat Xavier. Now it's time to start building the resume. And what better way to begin than by beating a ranked team on a neutral floor? But UC, let's say they lose to Dayton, they're going to have opportunities to account for it. Dayton has a very good chance to win the Atlantic 10, or at least have a very good record in the Atlantic 10. But what they do in the A10 needs backing. It's already got the backing of a very good win against UConn. It could certainly use the backing of a good neutral site game against Cincinnati. You talked about the crowd. I think it's going to be interesting. The Flyers last year probably had 65 to 70% of the fans at the Heritage Bank Center. And I think I have a lot of both in my life. I think if you talk to a lot of Dayton fans, they used that game last year downtown as it's an opportunity to go see the Flyers play a name opponent. And from a Cincinnati perspective, it was, oh God, I got to go watch the Bearcats downtown and play a game. It's not a part of our season ticket package. I think a lot of UD fans have viewed this as, you know what, especially in Cincinnati, those who live here in town, I'd rather go downtown and see Dayton play once against a named school than, drive up I-75, spend an hour, and then pay to see them play the schools in the Atlantic 10. And I think from a Cincinnati perspective, there's look, I'm already paying to go watch these teams in the Big 12. I'm not going to pay extra to go see them in an arena that is not as good against an opponent from the Atlantic 10. So I wonder if there's going to be a sort of post-shootout surge for UC fans. It's interesting. I have a buddy of mine who has asked 9 people to go to this game. And maybe it's a reflection of him. 9 people have told him no. So I still think there's a hesitancy and I'm sure mostly Bearcat fans, I'm sure there's a bit of a hesitancy to go down there. So I'm interested in the makeup of the crowd. When you say to some UC fans, well, God, it was, 70-30 in favor of Dayton last year, they get mad. And it's like, well, if you don't buy the tickets, then someone else will, and you can't control who's going to buy them. So I'm really interested in the makeup of the crowd. And I'm interested in the matchup itself because I think the thing that stands out most to me about Dayton watching them this year has been how good they've been with the ball. Entering last night, number 1 in the country in fewest turnovers per game, top 10 in fewest turnovers per possession. Cincinnati, I think, was in the top 17, 18 in fewest turnovers per possession. They've mostly been good with the ball this year. I think the Bearcats have the deeper team, but I think Dayton's guards, when they've been at their best, including in games they've lost to North Carolina and Iowa State, when they built big leads against those teams, their guards controlled the game. And if they can control the game against Cincinnati, then the Flyers are going to be at an advantage.
When you look at the schedule for Dayton going forward, they only have 4 Quad 1 games remaining. This is one of them. And the other 3, St. Bonaventure, VCU, and Rhode Island, all road games. those are all kind of in danger of slipping out of quad one,
Mhm.
as the season ends. So I would say this is the last game for Dayton when you talk about building a resume and those landmines that you could step on in A10 play. They're all over the place. This is the last game that you're really sure of that's going to stay a quad one game the rest of the season. And because of that, if you're Dayton, it's one that really going in here, you I don't want to say you have to win it because they've set themselves up well, like you talked about, but it's certainly one that if you get it, you feel a whole lot better about yourself.
Yeah, that resume looks a lot better with Cincinnati, in the win
Yeah.
column than it does if you don't have it. Because you're right. I mean, how many of those games when they are played end up being Q1 games?
Yeah. All right, last question for you here, Mo. Just
Yeah.
from an overall perspective, you're so close to both of these teams and these programs and following both of them, and I'm just curious what you think this game does, just from a fan perspective, from an overall perspective of these two teams agreeing to play this game at a neutral site like this.
Well, I wish we had more of them. College basketball to me in this area is at its best when you have more area teams playing against each other. You get more people paying attention, and there's good programs here. Look, it's going to sound like I keep knocking the Atlantic 10. I don't mean to do that, but if UC played a game at home against Loyola Chicago or George Mason, it's not as cool as playing Dayton. It just isn't. I'm not saying that as a UD alum. I would say the same if Xavier were to play Dayton, or if I have my choice between Xavier playing Loyola, Chicago, and Dayton, I want to see him play Dayton. Like, I think college basketball is just better in this town when you have area schools playing against each other, and so I wish there were more of it. I certainly understand the argument of this would be better if it was a home and home, but it's not. So I'll take what I can get. I certainly would like to think that the organizers of this event can expand upon it and get other area schools to be a part of it, at least in a one-off. Because I just think events like this are fun. I think it's fun. When I started following this sport closely, Paul, we still had Xavier playing Miami, and we still had Xavier playing Dayton, and we still had Kentucky playing Indiana, and we still had UC playing Miami. And UC and Dayton didn't really play on a regular basis, but they were conference members together in the Great Midwest for a couple of years. And those games to me were always more interesting, more fun, more talked about than any other on the schedule. And now many of those matchups don't happen. Kentucky doesn't play Indiana on a regular basis. Xavier and Dayton don't play. Miami doesn't play Xavier. Miami doesn't play Cincinnati. Miami doesn't play Dayton. Those are all matchups that I look forward to when I was growing up and into my 20s and 30s. And so if we could have them, if we could have more of them, or if we could at least have some of them, I think there's no downside to playing this game,
Yes.
right? I mean, there's like for folks, when this was first announced, and again, I understand there's people who don't like the arena. I really do understand that. But if you're not into this game, what alternative do you have? I hear from people when Xavier beats UC on a consistent basis, well, we just shouldn't play this game. Fine. What do you got that's better? Right?
Yeah.
So if you don't like this, if you don't like this game from the perspective of either school, what do you got that's better? And I have yet to hear the answer to that.
Mo, I appreciate you taking a few minutes today. Let's do it again sometime.
Mr. College Basketball, anything for you.
Thanks, Mo. Appreciate it.